they brought their religions, this is what they brought. They brought prohibition of illicit relationships, prohibition of homosexuality. They brought subdued worship with uniform rituals. They brought all of these things. And what is left of those things in these two faiths today? Where is formal prayer? Where is fasting? Some of them, they fast from things. So for example, I love grapes, man. So you know what? I'm going to fast from grapes. They'll eat everything else, but they just won't eat grapes. They'll create a fast which suits their desires. But the fasting that the prophets came with, they don't follow that anymore. Pilgrimage, where is pilgrimage? Where is congregational worship? Where is separation of the sexes? It doesn't exist. Where is the prohibition of illicit relationship? This is something which they what? They fully accept and welcome. Where is prohibition of homosexuality? This is something which most of the other faiths, most of the denominations in these other faiths have what? Have acquiesced, have capitulated, have accepted and embraced. And where is subdued worship? Go to a church nowadays. It's singing and it's guitars and where is the subdued worship that the prophets brought? You see none of that today, and in many cases, many churches are closing what? Closing their doors and selling their properties because no one comes to them anymore. And the Prophet said in the hadith, لَتَتَّبِئَنَّ سَنَنْ مَنْ كَانَ قَبْلَكُمْ حَذْوَ الْخُذَةِ بِالْخُذَّةِ شِبْرٍ بِشِبْرٍ وَذِرَاعٍ بِذِرَاعٍ حَتَّى لَوْ دَخَلُوا جُحْرَ ضَبٍّ لَدَخَلْتُمُوهُ. He said, you will follow the footsteps of those who came before you, step by step, inch by inch, to the point that if they got into the hole of a lizard, if they did something that was detrimental to themselves, you could see how it was harming them. You would do the exact same thing. You would follow right behind. And that's the problem. Ibn Mas'ud is warning us that this is what will become of the deen if we start stripping off these things or giving up these things, letting these things peel away, which are so critical to the protection of what? Baydat al-Islam. It's almost like if you had an apple and you peeled it. You peeled it and you left it out. What would happen? It would turn brown, it would spoil, it would rot. What's protecting it? It's what? That peel. There are certain rituals that Allah has given us because they what? They protect the core of Islam. And if we don't practice them, as Ibn Mas'ud said, your deen will become what? Rotten. It will become spoiled. It would go what? It would go astray like the other ummah, the other communities have gone astray. Then he said, وَلَقَدْ رَأَيْتُنَا وَمَا يَتَخَلَّفُ عَنْهَا إِلَّا مُنَافِقٌ مَعْلُومٌ النِّفَاقِ. I see that we, the companions of Muhammad ﷺ, we did not consider, the person who did not perform these prayers, we didn't consider him to be anything but what? A clear and present munafiq. So back then, this was an important gauge of faith. But I understand that times have changed, and it wouldn't be correct to attribute hypocrisy to people who don't what? Who don't pray in the masjid. But at the same time, this statement of Ibn Mas'ud, it still has benefit. It still has a meaning. It still has an application. Because we can't think that it was a sign of hypocrisy back then. It's a sign of piety today. It's still a sign of what? Of a shortcoming, a weakness, a naqs, a deficiency that we need to shore up. And so we have to recognize the importance of this prayer through these words of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Then last but not least, this will be the last thing. He said, a man would be carried between two people because he couldn't come to the masjid of his own power. If he couldn't come to the masjid of his own power, he would be excused. But even if he had the concession, the excuse from Allah not to come, he still wanted to come because what? His heart was attached to the mosque. He wanted to be in the mosque. He wanted to get more reward. And so we have to look at that when we don't have a similar excuse. And I know in many cases what keeps most people from coming is they're busy. I know people are really, really busy. They have a lot of things going on between work, between family, between some people may be, in addition to working, they may be studying. They may be trying to get additional certifications. They may be trying to do graduate studies. They may be doing postdoc. I understand people have a lot of things on their plate. If you have children, your children's activities become what? Your responsibility to get them to and from, etc. But at the end of the day, what is easier for us to do is what? Is if we have an excuse, to use that excuse to become lackadaisical, to become complacent. So then when we don't have an excuse, we still don't go. And so what we have to do is we have to push ourselves like these early Muslims pushed themselves. We make ourselves make time and come and pray in Allah's house. Because why? Because that is one of the qualities of the true Muslims which we all strive and want so dearly to be. And that is basically my commentary on the khutbah, and I will open it up. We have maybe like 10 minutes or so for any comments, critiques, or questions. Any questions, any critiques, any complaints? Going once? Going twice? Tafadhal, Shaykh.
Regarding the issue of declaring someone out of Islam, so considering that some rulers of Muslim lands, they do certain things that from the apparent action looks like they have made something haram into halal. Like for example, they allow banks to be established that are based on riba. So there are some people who claim that this ruler has ruled by other than Sharia.
Okay.
And they use that to declare the rulers to be out of Islam.
Okay.
And say that it is permissible to fight against them and remove them. What is the correct understanding?
First of all, at-takfir, which is declaring someone to be a non-Muslim, who their basic state or their original state is Islam. Declaring them to be a non-Muslim is something extremely dangerous. And the proof of that is a hadith of Bukhari on the authority of Ibn Umar, in which the Prophet said, "Man qala li akhihi ya kafir, fa in kana kama qala, wa illa harat ilay, or raja'at alay." He said, whoever says regarding his brother, "You are a disbeliever," or "He is a disbeliever," then if it is as he said, then fine, because it could happen. A person could leave Islam, and if you say that this person left Islam and you are accurate, then that's fine, it is what it is. But if he erred, if he was mistaken, then that will return to what? To him. And as Shawkani rahimahullah ta'ala, he said that this is something which should make a Muslim reticent and give him pause before saying so-and-so is a non-Muslim, because if he's mistaken, he will be from that group of people who the Prophet said are non-Muslims. You see? And it's a big difference between you and me saying it and the Prophet saying it about someone, and we would fall into that category if we were mistaken. So it's something that people should, be careful about. And it really is the place of qualified scholars and not the layman. That's the first thing. The second thing is that in order for a ruling of takfir for a person to be labeled with kufr, who was previously a Muslim, in order for that to take place, we have to have something called tawafur al-shurut untifa al-mawani'. So there are certain boxes that have to be checked. We have to say that the person, for example, they knew what they were doing. They did it. They knew what they were doing, and they knew that that thing was disbelief. And they did it intentionally. They were not coerced, and they didn't have a ta'wil sa'il. They didn't have some proof or text or fatwa or something that made them believe that what they were doing was right to do given their circumstances. That's tawafur al-shurut. On the other side of that, we have to have what they call intifa al-mawani'. There are certain things that can prohibit that, and we have to make sure that none of those are applicable to the person. So for example, and all of them are the opposite of what? Of the shurut, the conditions. So for example, the person may be jahil. They don't know that this thing that they're doing is kufr, that will take them out of Islam. And that jahil, that ignorance, will be an excuse that will prevent them from being declared kuffar. As Allah says in the Quran, وَمَا كُنَّا مُعَذِّبِينَ حَتَّى نَبْعَثَ رَسُولًا. We're not going to punish anyone until we send a messenger. We appoint someone to let them know that what they're doing is wrong. Before that, because of that jahala, because of that ignorance, we won't punish them. The same thing, sometimes a person, they do the wrong thing, but they do it inadvertently. They do it by mistake, by accident. That's also what? Something which will prevent a person from being what? Declared a kafir. And the proof that the scholars give for this is the hadith, where the Prophet ﷺ was talking about how happy Allah is with the tawbah, with the repentance of a servant. And he gave a similitude, he gave an analogy. He said, it's like one of you, just to show how happy Allah is that when a servant repents. He said, it's like one of you. He said, it's like one of you who was traveling with his camel and all of his belongings. And then, let's stop this because, sorry about that, but it's about to die and I don't want to lose it, so just give me 1 second. So then, he was traveling with all his belongings. And then all of a sudden, somehow, some way, he lost his camel. And so he looked, and he couldn't see. He's like in an open, barren desert, and he's looking in all directions. He can't see the camel anymore. And he's saying to himself, all of my belongings, my water, my provisions, my clothing, the things that I warm myself with at night during the cold, and all those things are on the camel. And the camel is basically, my life is on that camel. Without that camel, I'm going to perish, to the point he becomes so despondent that he lies down and starts covering himself with dirt so nobody passing by will be burdened with having to bury his body. Then all of a sudden he looks up and he sees that camel. And the Prophet said that the person says, Allahumma, ana rabbuk wa anta abdi, akhta min shiddat al-farah. He says, oh Allah, you are my slave and I am your Lord. He made an error because of what? Because he was so happy, and he didn't become a kafir because what? He said it or did it inadvertently, although what he said is kufr. The third the third thing would be what? Coercion. That sometimes people are coerced into doing something which amounts to kufr. They don't want to do it, but pressure is applied to them that puts them in a situation that greater harm will ensue if they don't do what they're being asked to do. And the famous proof for that is the hadith of Ammar ibn Yasir, that we know that he said kufr. He said it. He cursed Allah, cursed His Messenger, and he declared that he believed in Al-Lat wal-Uzza. And then, when he was so ashamed, he was hiding from the Prophet. The Prophet asked about him. He said, where is he? I'll bring him to me. They brought him. He told him, I'm just ashamed because I said this. He said, but how do you keep attention to qalbak? He said, at the end of the day, what's in your heart? He said, I'm mutma'in bil iman. I have complete faith. I just said it because I couldn't take the torture anymore. The Prophet said, in adu fa'ud. He said, if they do it again, then say it again. Because what? Because of coercion. Allah revealed an ayah about that. And then last but not least, from the mawani' is ta'wilun sa'id. That sometimes you have these fatawa, you have different things that are being said and done, and people become confused and they really believe that what they're doing is okay when it's not okay. So before a person can make takfir, they have to do what? They have to make sure, tawaffarat shurut, all of the conditions are, all the boxes can be checked, and none of the mawani', none of the prohibitive factors exist. And that's something that, again, only the scholars can determine, because you'd have to know a lot of information about the situation before you can make a determination. So a lot of people are quick to say, al-Rais al-Fulani, such and such king, such and such president, such and such leader, is a kafir. And they're running the risk of what? Falling into that first category. The last thing I'll say about this is that these rulers, whatever they do, they'll meet God with those deeds. And we will meet God with our deeds. And I've been in the company of people who spend a lot of time making takfir of the rulers, and they themselves have a lot of their own personal issues that they should be dealing with and focusing on. And one of the makayat, one of the tricks of shaitan, is that he busies us with the errors and the faults of others instead of busying us with what? Our own faults. And I want to say that one of the early Muslims, in fact one of the companions, said that a person has been truly fooled by the shaitan when he busies himself with the faults of others and has no time left to concern himself with his own faults. So that's what I would say about that. But again, we're not in a position as laymen, and that's a subject we should really steer clear of for the reasons that I mentioned. Any other questions, comments, complaints, critiques of fellowship?
Basically, it's like, so you talked about hypocrisy, and I was wondering, for those who want to know how to either stop themselves or be able to stop a fellow Muslim brother or sister from hypocrisy, what would be the proper steps?
The Prophet ﷺ, he outlined what we call the nifaq al-amali, the practical hypocrisy, which is not the nifaq that's on the inside, it's the nifaq that we demonstrate on the outside, that we basically have adopted certain characteristics of the people of hypocrisy. So the way that a person identifies hypocrisy is through these examples that the Prophet gave. And if he identifies any of those qualities in himself, his job is to do the opposite. And if he were to identify those qualities in someone else, his job would be to give them a nasiha and to point out that, for example, the Prophet said, Ayatul Munafiq Thalath, إِذَا حَدَّثَ كَذَبَ وَإِذَا وَعَدَ أَخْلَفَ وَإِذَا تُمِنَ خَانَ. He said the munafiq has 3 qualities. In one hadith and the other one, he said there are 4 qualities. He said, إِذَا حَدَّثَ كَذَبَ, when he speaks, he lies. وَإِذَا وَعَدَ أَخْلَفَ, when he makes a promise, he breaks his promise, he doesn't keep it. وَإِذَا تُمِنَ خَانَ, and if he is trusted, he betrays the trust. If he makes a covenant, he doesn't keep the covenant. If a person were to identify this, for example, he has a friend and that friend lies a lot. So, for example, they go someplace and let's say, for example, he buys something from a store. He gets it home and he damages it. He just bought it and he was trying to put it together and he did something wrong and broke it. So he says, hey, let's go back to that store that I bought this from, because I want to get a refund. And he goes and he tells him, this was broke out of the box. Is that true? That's not true. Okay? So you witness this. That he did what? He lied. So you tell him, Ya akhi, that's from the qualities of the munafiqeen. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't lie. You give him a nasiha. If you see the quality, then you say something. As the Prophet said in the hadith, مَنْ رَأَى مِنْكُمْ مُنْكَرًا فَيُغَيِّرُ بِيَدِهِ فَلَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِلِسَانِهِ فَلَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِقَلْبِهِ وَذَلِكَ أَضْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ. He said, whoever amongst you sees something wrong, he should change it with his hand. If he can't do that, change it with his tongue. He should speak out against it, say, hey, that's wrong, give him a nasiha. And if he can't do that, then at the very least, he should what? He should use his relationships. He distance himself from the sin and from the sinner. So that's how you should approach it, inshallah ta'ala. Any other hot fellowship?
So if you're in that scenario, what is the proper etiquette of nasiha?
There are a few etiquettes of a nasiha, and perhaps we'll actually have a khutbah on that at some point. But I'll mention them ala ujala. One of them is, first of all, to have knowledge. So before a person can give a nasiha, he needs to know for sure the thing he's going to advise about, that he knows that that thing is wrong. He knows it's ruling. So he shouldn't have basically a vague knowledge, or I think this is how it is. If he doesn't have knowledge, he shouldn't give a nasiha, because enjoining good and forbidding evil has to be mabniyun ala Al-ilm, it has to be based upon knowledge. قُلْ هَذِهِ سَبِيلِي أَدْعُو إِلَى اللَّهِ عَلَى بَصِيرَةٍ. Say, this is my path, I call to Allah upon basira. The meaning of basira is al-ilm al-nafi'. It is the beneficial knowledge, or al-ilm al-sahih, the correct knowledge. So that's the first thing. You have to have knowledge. If you don't have knowledge, if you're not sure, you just what? You're on the side of caution, you remain quiet. The second thing is that when you advise, you have to understand that advice is like a medicine that tastes bad. Advice is like a medicine that tastes bad. When you give people advice, generally speaking, people have, whether they admit it or not, they have a certain level of arrogance. They don't like to be advised. And so when you give them advice, they do what? The initial, because it smells bad, it tastes bad, the initial reaction is to do what? To push it away. They don't want the advice. So you have to sweeten the advice and make it palatable. And how do you do that? You do it through what? Through gentleness. You add some honey to the advice. And this is what the Prophet meant when he said, "Inna Allah rafiqun yuhibbur rifq, yu'ti ala rifqi ma la yu'ti ala unfi wa la ma siwa." He said, indeed Allah is gentle and He loves gentleness. And He gives through gentleness, will He not give through harshness or any other thing. So when you give a nasiha, you have to give it what? Gently, softly. You have to sweeten it with honey so that it becomes more palatable and the person readily accepts it. Another etiquette of a nasiha is a sitr. That when you advise someone, you advise them in private. You advise them between you and them, and you don't advise them publicly. So for example, let's say that let's go back to the case of the guy who lied and said that the thing was broken out of the box, but it wasn't. He broke it. And you see him in the masjid. You didn't get a chance to tell him there, but you see him in the masjid and there's a bunch of people. It's like after Jummah out here in the foyer. And you say, "Ahmed, man, why'd you lie?" In front of everyone. No, you don't do that. That's between you and Ahmed. There's nobody here named Ahmed, is there? Is there? If there is, I don't mean you. I'm sorry. Not you, Ahmed. Another Ahmed. But you don't advise him publicly, you advise him one in private. The Prophet said in the hadith, "In Allah sitir yuhibbu as-sitr." Allah conceals and He loves it. You what? You conceal. Just between me and Ahmed, I'm going to say, "Hey, you shouldn't have done that," but not in public. These are three of the most important etiquettes. One last etiquette is the sabr. You should be patient, and patient means two things. One, you have to be patient upon any raddat fi'l. That there might be some reaction from the person you advise, and they might say some not so nice things, and you absorb that. And the other patience is that they might not respond to the nasiha, even if they seem to accept it, they may continue doing the thing. And that may annoy you. Man, I told you. You need to act. You need to get in line. No, it might take them some time to go from processing it to actually practicing it, and you have to be patient and let that process play out and kind of occur organically. And the Prophet also taught us that, and I'll close with this, in the hadith, where Anas ibn Malik, he said that the Prophet passed by a grave. And there was a woman who was crying at that grave. It was the grave of her sabi, a young child of hers who had passed away suddenly. So she was crying and she was lamenting his death and she was, bemoaning and, etc. And so the Prophet, as he passed by, he said, "Ittaqillaha wasbiri." He said, "Fear Allah and be patient." And the woman didn't realize who it was who said it. So she responded by saying, "Ilayka anni. فَإِنَّكَ لَمْ تُصِبْ بِمُصِيبَتِي." She said, "Get away from me. You don't know my pain. You don't know my suffering." She yelled at the Prophet and told him to do what? To go away. The Prophet, he didn't say, "I'm Rasulullah. You have to listen to me. You have to do what Allah says. اسْتَجِيبُوا لِلَّهِ وَالرَّسُولِ إِذَا دَعَاكُمْ لِمَا يُحْيِيكُمْ." Right? He didn't say you have to listen because Allah said. He didn't. He just what? He kept going. He realized that the woman wasn't ready to what? To practice what he had told her. He just kept going. He absorbed it and kept going. And then later the woman, she was told, "Do you know who that was that you yelled at, that you ran off?" And she said, "No." said it was a messenger of Allah. So then she went to his home and she apologized and said, what the Prophet is teaching us is that when people are not ready to receive the advice, when it's taking them time to go from processing to practicing, we do what? We back off and we give them what? We give them space. That's what the Prophet did. Just kept going. Just kept going. So these are 4 etiquettes that will help us to do a better job of giving a nasiha. May Allah make us from those who listen to the talk and follow the best of it. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه